What is up, everyone? Today I'll be doing a video basically showing you how you can call any API in Supabase more specifically, or any PostgreSQL based database. And I'll show you basically how you can call an API, get a response, and do something with that data without using edge functions or any complicated type of technologies like those. So let's go ahead and see how we can do this and stay as minimal as possible. So I'll switch over to my screen right now. So let's start first. So for my example, one thing I wanted to do is basically be able to call my Olama AI embedding server and basically represent some text as a vector embedding. You don't need to understand what it means. I'm just going to show you what the result is. So basically, when you execute this function, you basically get a numerical representation of a specific string. So for my example, I used test. This is a test. I specified the endpoint I wanted to call, and then I specified the embedding model I'm using. And this gives me basically the ability to call an endpoint and get a response. So the way you would do this, if you were to do like Supabase says, is basically you'd start locally, create a function called embed, use their default supabase.ai.session, and just embed. And basically, what they're doing is exactly the same thing that I'm doing, but just under the hood. And the reason they want you to use those edge functions instead of using what I'm doing is because it costs more to run edge functions. Each invocation costs tokens, and then after a specific amount of time, you're going to get, charges for the usage of those edge requests. So just make sure that when you create edge functions that you know that the cost is going to increment pretty dramatically if you use a lot of them. So this is why they're not showing it how to do it, but I'm going to show you how you can do it and save as much as possible. So first thing we're going to do is basically I'm going to show you what is the SQL function we're going to use. An SQL function is something you can do in any SQL based database. It's also called stored procedures in some SQL variation like MySQL and SQL Server. But for example, we're just going to create this simple generate embedding function. I'm going to put the code in the description. And basically, this is where I have my function that returns a vector of type 768. So this is 768 dimensions. You don't need to understand what it does. But basically what it does is it gets a URL from the function. So when we're passing our server IP, we're basically concatenating to a full URL. And we're specifying that we want to call the API embeddings endpoint. We're constructing a body, so we're specifying the model as I've shown in the previous example. We're putting no mic embed text right here. The prompt is going to be the input text that we're using, and then we simply do the HTTP post request and we parse the JSON response. So this is a very simple call, a simple HTTP request that you could do in JavaScript, Python, any other language. And we just simply return the result as an array of numbers. So we basically parse it into a vector 768 value, and this gives us basically the result that we're seeing here. We're seeing basically a number representation. So if I run it again, we can see that it's going to load. And we have the result right here, which is our expected result. Now, how would you call this via, let's say, JavaScript instead of calling like they did right here with their edge function? What we're going to do is basically, once we've created that function, so make sure to run that code in your database. So what you can do is just put it in the SQL editor, select it all, click run, and then it's going to say success, no rows, return, and then you can run it and it's going to work. So once you've done that, what you can do is basically run it with a simple Supabase client like I've done right here. So just do the same thing. Instead of using simply a select call like we did before to call a function in Supabase, a database function with the basically the API. We're going to use the supabase.rpc, which allows us to specify the function we want to call, and then we can pass parameters. So the parameters are exactly the same as we were using right here, but instead we're passing it as a JSON object, and we're basically printing the data and error object that is returned from this call. So if we try to run it, so let's do bun index.ts. So basically, as you can see, once we've run the bun index.ts script, we're going to get the result as a numerical representation of the actual text we've done. So as you can see, we also have the null, which is the error we're trying to print. But basically, you can see we're ending with minus 0.38411067. So if we run it with something else, this is a test, and here I am. And then we run it again, we're going to see that the number is going to be different. So we had minus 0.38, we're now at minus 0.11. This is because the model embeds the text and puts it in a vector graph that basically has a lot of dimensions, so it changes the position based on what the text is. This is outside of the subject of this video, but as you can see, we've successfully called an API through a Supabase functions. Now, one thing I want to show you is to be able to do an HTTP request like we're showing here in my function HTTP post. This is part of a library of Postgres that is HTTP, and you need to enable this library by going to the database and extensions, and then go to HTTP. So initially you're not going to see it, but just do HTTP, install it, and as you can see, you'll get access to HTTP client for PostgreSQL, allows web page retrieval inside the database, stuff like that. And this will allow you to get access to all HTTP request types. So whether it's a get, a post, a put, patch, whatever you want. And this will give you what I just show you. And this is pretty much it. So instead of using a edge function, we're going to save on that usage and use a simple HTTP request. Sometimes abstractions like the edge functions are really unnecessary for people who can stay basic and really don't need that kind of simplicity. This is the kind of reason that I make those videos, is really to save you time, money, and effort. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.